Diaries of one of Taiwan's most controversial figures are published for the very first time. As fears rise of the potential misuse of AI, the U.S. takes a step toward regulating the technology. China remembers its former premier, but official media keeps a tight grip on expressions of grief. Plus, one band hopes to spark a renaissance in one of Taiwan's biggest and most threatened languages. Hello, I'm Eric Gao, and you're watching TaiwanPlus News. The diaries of one of Taiwan's most divisive historical figures have been published for the very first time. Former President Chiang Kai-shek ruled Taiwan for 25 years till his death in 1975. And new access to his journals has revived decades-long debates about his controversial legacy. Sam Hui and Rick Lauer report.
Personal accounts from a man pivotal to Taiwan history. The diaries of controversial former leader Chiang Kai-shek are back in the country after years of legal wrangling.
这个是多年的期望，因为一个总统的日记怎么会流落到外面去？所以很多学者从不同的面向来努力的，希望能够把日记弄回来。
They are part of a trove of diaries, manuscripts, letters and other documents donated by a descendant of Chiang to the Hoover Institution in the United States. For years, they were only available to academics. But they were returned to Taiwan after courts here and in the US ruled that documents written by presidents are property of the country. Now they're back, Taiwan's National Archive is publishing the diaries in full for the first time. This volume of Chiang's journals covers 1948 to 1954. That's the time when Chiang and his nationalist forces moved their government to Taiwan after losing the Chinese Civil War to the communists. Chiang ruled Taiwan as a dictatorship until his death in 1975. During his time in power, the country experienced a period of rapid economic growth, but it also saw brutal crackdowns on opposition to his rule that left thousands of people killed or imprisoned.
他在台湾当了25年的总统，到目前为止是任期最长的一位总统，而且是从这个1949那个最敏感的时代。
Chiang remains an extremely divisive figure, condemned by some in Taiwan as a tyrant, but revered by others as a strong leader who built up the country's infrastructure and kept communist China at bay. Now the public here has the chance to contemplate one of the most important periods in Taiwan's history through the eyes of the man at the centre of it all. Patrick Chen, Sam Hui and Rick Lauert for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's military has issued a warning about the threat posed by China, citing Beijing's increased military coercion over the past year.
我们可以了解，中共是目前我们面临的最重要的一个国家安全的一个威胁。所以，不管是用偷袭的方式也好，或者是其他的文攻武吓的这些方式也好，国军对于中共所有的这些可能采取的行动，我们都做了非常缜密的分析跟观察。
In a press conference, Taiwan's military responded to concerns that the war in Gaza could encourage China to take military action against Taiwan. Now, this comes as 23 Chinese warplanes and 6 naval ships were spotted around the country. One of China's aircraft carriers, the Shandong, is currently sailing in waters east of Taiwan, and analysts say that China could be getting ready to conduct large-scale exercises. The first ever picture book aimed at teaching children about national defense here in Taiwan has just been released. This book is published by a veterans group and a private company. It uses simple language and pictures to introduce concepts about protecting the country. The authors say it's meant to help young people feel closer to those serving in the military. They also want to share what to do if a conflict were to break out.
如果我们可以，例如说战争来的时候啊，懂得先躲起来，或是帮军人做后备，帮他们做一些加油。那这个观念如果可以从小孩子开始扎根的话，那我相信我们台湾会非常棒。
Taiwan's economy minister is downplaying concerns that China could slash parts of a trade deal. Beijing has threatened to cancel some benefits under a 2010 trade agreement. It's also extending probes into alleged Taiwan trade barriers until just the day before Taiwan's presidential election in January. Economy Minister Wang Meihua says only a few industries would be seriously affected if China backs out of the deal. She says the government is already working with those sectors to change their operations or to find different markets. After a post-pandemic slump in electronics demand, some industry leaders are expecting to see a strong recovery in the lucrative chips industry next year. Now, that includes South Korean tech giant Samsung. The company just reported its highest quarterly profits so far this year, and it says that this is a promising sign that 2024 will be even better. Now, here in Taiwan, a major research institute says that booming demand for AI and high-performance computing means that Taiwan's chip sector production value could hit a record high next year. Over in the U.S., President Joe Biden has signed an executive order on artificial intelligence. It's the country's first major legally binding set of controls on this technology.
One thing is clear. To realize the promise of AI and avoid the risk, we need to govern this technology.
Now, this order is a step up from voluntary pledges made by AI companies to tell users when content is AI generated. It now requires that developers share AI safety test results with the government before being released to the public. Leaders around the world have been working to regulate the rapidly changing tech. That includes the Group of 7 economies, which just signed an 11-point code on AI. All of these rules aim to tackle concerns that the tech threatens consumers, minority groups, and national security. For more on the impact of President Biden's executive order, our reporter Joyce Zhen spoke with Frank Pascal, an AI law expert and professor at Cornell University.
The scope for artificial intelligence is massive, but what are the main concerns or areas that President Biden is trying to control with this new order?
Yeah, that's a terrific question because it is a moving target, definitely, when you think about AI nowadays. But then we can look at the present and the future, near future and far future. We see these much larger, more sophisticated systems like generative AI systems, like the kind of thing behind ChatGPT. And those are things that are more like foundation models that are trying to do lots of things, simulate language, program, do other sorts of things like that. By far, the most emphasis in the executive order is to think about the worst things that could happen with respect to AI that, say, might be used to create pandemics or that would be used to that might be in charge of infrastructure and fail and malfunction or be able to be hacked or something like that. In the other areas where we're concerned about AI being biased, about having certain, for example, we've seen AI systems that don't recognize people, certain nationalities, those sorts of biases, that's stuff that is in the executive order, but it's going to remain to be seen how well that gets translated into really a robust action by the agencies in charge of specific things.
This is the first major binding government action on AI to come from the US. And as an AI law expert, do you think it's enough?
Yeah, I think it is a first step. I mean, I think that, that what they're doing with AI safety is encouraging. For a long time, a lot of people in the US were complaining that we were falling behind, that there was something like a Brussels effect, where Brussels and Europe were leading the world with regulation, and we were just trying to catch up. And I think that this is a step towards catching up with the more, say, forceful and robust approach that is being pioneered in Europe.
AI has been a hot topic for some time now, but it's usually riddled with a lot of tech jargon. But in essence, what are the main ways everyday users can expect to see AI show up in their lives?
You're going to be seeing it with respect to, say, customer service and other areas like that. I think that increasingly the big use cases that are being put out are, when you call a company, when you try to buy something, when you try to complain about something, that there'll be going to be a layer of AI between you and the ultimate person you want to reach. I hope to see that in medicine, you'll increasingly see some clinical decision support of how doctors are making their decisions via AI. Because that could be a really useful thing where the AI could, for example, suggest rare diagnoses or hard diagnoses to a physician. One final example I would give is an increasing thirst for data by AI, from AI. So a lot of these companies are going to want to record what people are doing in their jobs. And that's going to be a cause of a lot of controversy and negotiation over exactly how much they can record of people as they try to figure out how they could make robots who could operate in the world the way the current workers do.
Once again, that was law professor Frank Pascal of Cornell University speaking with our reporter Joyce Zeng. A new electricity pricing scheme aimed at factories is on the way. Now, this comes ahead of a presidential election with a looming energy crunch in the background. But as John Van Trieste reports, some industry groups don't think it's going to make a big difference.
The factories that power the country's economy are set for a change that could affect their bottom line. From November, the government is doubling so-called off-peak hours for big electricity users, times when power is cheaper, from 9 to 18. It hopes potential savings and a bigger selection of hours will convince factories to move peak production away from times when power is in high demand, easing pressure on the grid. Energy is a chronic problem for Taiwan. It depends heavily on imported fuel, and power consumption has jumped 10% in the past decade. 3 major blackouts in recent years have shown problems with the grid's resilience. Energy has also become a political issue in the lead-up to the presidential election, with debates over nuclear power dividing candidates. The Economy Ministry is upbeat about the new pricing schedule, promising savings to a range of big industrial sectors while evening out power plants' load.
工具机、机械业、铸造业、钢铁还有纺织等等，那他们就可以来做这样的调整，来降低他们的电费。那我们初估大概是有1.7万的高压用户可以来试用。
Those savings, up to 22 US cents per kilowatt hour, would quickly add up for heavy power users. But the reaction from the industrial sector has been muted. With the export orders they depend on down, some factories are concerned about more than their power bill.
没有这个诱因了，光靠拍天降温就在放无薪假的呀，还有什么电价有什么诱因？你是到10块我嘛不容易。
And there are those who say factories are already cutting back on power usage, and that in any case, peak or off-peak hours don't matter to factories that run 24 hours a day.
自动化的工厂，它本来就是24小时在操作了，监工的时间停下来，然后用利用的时间，那产量又减少。
So, with less than a day to go before it takes effect, it's uncertain just how big the impact of the new pricing schedule may be. Howard Zhang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thailand will temporarily remove visa requirements for Taiwanese and Indian tourists starting November 11th. This new program will allow Taiwanese tourists to enter the country for 30 days without a visa until next May. Thailand launched a similar program for Chinese and Kazakh tourists in September. The move comes as Bangkok seeks to boost tourism. Coming up after the break, bringing bats back from the brink. Scientists plan to save Taiwan's flying rodents.
For more stories from Taiwan, around the world, and in front of a World War II-era aircraft carrier, please download the TaiwanPlus app. It's bigger than it looks.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world. Charted by the freest country in Asia.
5, 4, 3, 2.
A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ian Kavat. Taiwanese semiconductor giant TSMC.
Public buses to be electric by 2030. A mission that begins with listening.
And telling the stories of Taiwan.
In Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Drawing insight from original thinkers.
And sharing it with the world. TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Areas near a hospital in Gaza have been hit by Israeli artillery and airstrikes. That's according to the Palestinian Red Crescent, who say around 12,000 people are sheltering in that hospital. Israel made no immediate comment, but continues to bombard the Hamas-controlled territory. Gaza's health ministry says over 8,300 people, including 3,500 children, have been killed in the strikes. An estimated 31 journalists have also died while covering the conflict, which started when Hamas militants raided Israel 3 weeks ago. There are growing calls from around the world for the violence to stop. but those have been rejected by Israeli officials. Chinese state media says the remains of China's former Premier Li Keqiang will be cremated later this week. Li had served in that role for a decade and died from a heart attack last Friday. In the announcement, he was declared, quote, an outstanding revolutionary, statesman, and leader. But official reaction to his death has been otherwise muted, contrasting with public displays of mourning. To find out more about the reaction to Li's death in China and what it says about the politics of the Communist Party, our reporter Ed Moon spoke to David Bandersky, director of the China Media Project.
What has the official reaction to Li Keqiang's death been like, and how does it compare to the passing of former leaders such as Jiang Zemin last year?
I guess we could say there's no such thing as a private death when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. So we've seen what we often see with leaders, including senior leaders who pass away, a very boilerplate language. But one thing we can really note is that he's been sidelined. So we had on the 27th, after his death, all we had was a very short, very terse Xinhua news agency announcement that ended with obituary forthcoming. And then the next day we had the obituary, which no really revealing details, just about him as kind of a faithful servant of the party. So definitely, deaths are always a sensitive matter. I think in this case, even more so because as China faces a lot of current economic pain, the former Premier Li Keqiang is associated with more pragmatic policymaking on the economy. And so to the extent he's seen as sidelined by Xi Jinping and by the kind of cult of personality of Xi Jinping, this is a really sensitive current political issue for the party.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how media in China is used to memorialize leaders? Is it a top-down process, or is it up to individual publications to decide how they want to proceed?
This is definitely a top-down matter. There is no discretion for the official party state media, and there's no discretion certainly for the other media, for commercial media, which are still in China linked to the party. But again, we didn't really see much coverage at all in other news websites and portals. It was very downplayed. And this is probably because there were orders from the top, we can surmise, about being very cautious in how it's treated.
Among the Chinese public, there's been mourning for Li, both on social media sites and at various other locations around the country. Can you tell us why there's been such a contrast between the muted official reaction and the public displays of mourning?
Sometimes, in retrospect, leaders who have died become much more lovable after they've passed. So there's a kind of, I guess the point is that it becomes an opportunity for ordinary Chinese, if they're upset or if they want to voice their the problems they might have with the leadership and so on. It becomes an opportunity, and the leadership knows this, and this is why it controls it so carefully. But because there's such an interest in controlling the public opinion, sort of in top down on this sensitive issue or moment of Li Keqiang's death, there is, of course, an aggressive attempt to contain any sort of speculation about Li Keqiang's death. For example, on Weibo, and try to search for Li Keqiang, it's generally quite a sanitized thread.
That was David Bandersky from the China Media Project speaking to our reporter Ed Moon. A traditional structure built by indigenous Pinumu Mayan in Taiwan's south has been deemed unsafe and may have to be demolished. But members of the community fear it's just the latest example of the government not doing enough to protect their traditions. Bryn Thomas has the story.
This fashioned bamboo structure in Taiwan's southeastern city of Taidong has found itself at the center of a debate between the country's indigenous peoples and the government. It was built 10 years ago by members of Taiwan's indigenous Pinumu Mayan people and is an example of their architectural traditions. But buildings like this can no longer be put up legally. It means that fewer are being built, and those that remain, like this one, are in danger of disappearing. The city has asked local indigenous authorities to repair it, but without better funding, they may be forced to tear it down. People here fear it's just the latest example of their culture disappearing. They're calling on the government to change the law to accommodate buildings like this and to provide funding to conserve the few that survive. But funding renovations for a single structure doesn't fix a law that many in the community feel is broken. In the end, Taiwan's indigenous peoples are left with the authority to demolish or repair a traditional structure, but not the authority to build one.
我们还是尊重部落，看要怎么拆，有部落的提出来的方案来做处理。
This building in Taidong is an example of a cultural tradition that some feel is being taken apart piece by piece. They're calling on the government to lay a more inclusive foundation built to last. Andy Xue and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Despite fewer young people speaking Taiwanese Hokkien, one band here is using the language to pair traditional music with fresh sounds. Laurel Stewart went to one of their rehearsals.
Combining traditional instruments with Taiwanese lyrics and modern rock, Lilium is a band bringing a contemporary twist to traditional music. While many contemporary artists in Taiwan sing in Mandarin or draw from American influences, they say singing in Taiwanese Hokkien is an important way to stay connected to their roots.
Growing up, I listened to English language songs, but when I try to make my own, I feel like I don't have any connection to those words. And if I don't believe it, I just can't do it.
Mandarin is the most spoken language in Taiwan, followed by Taiwanese Hokkien, also simply called Taiwanese. It's a language that arrived in Taiwan with immigrants from China's southern Fujian province in the 17th century. Taiwanese, Hakka, and indigenous languages are still spoken in Taiwan, but government efforts in the 1960s to promote Mandarin as the national language meant many people stopped teaching their children these languages. Today, only 30% of people born in the 1990s can speak Taiwanese.
When I was born, my mom was afraid that I couldn't speak good Mandarin like her, because she couldn't speak good Mandarin, and she thinks that makes her embarrassing and bad. So she told my grandmother that I should start with Mandarin first. So that's the thing that my grandmother still talking about recently. She would say that, you speak bad Taiwanese, like, because of your mom.
Yishuo is now actively learning Taiwanese, and he speaks to his family in their mother tongue. And aside from singing in Taiwanese just being good practice, he also says the language is more melodic. Unlike other languages where there's one note for every word, each Taiwanese word can be stretched to fill multiple notes.
So, for example, hu we gong ming, like 4 words, but you sing like hu, and then the second word, and then another meaningless sound, and then the third word, gong bi, and the fourth word, gong bi.
It's a style reminiscent of traditional opera, and the band complements it with instruments like this yueqin, or moon guitar, this bowed instrument called a yehu, and this gong. And when combined with more modern sounds, like at this concert in Taipei, something entirely new is created. Blending past and present, tradition and modernity, they're singing an ode to Taiwan, not just for themselves, but for people across generations to enjoy. Scott Huang and Laurel Stewart for TaiwanPlus.
The bat population is dwindling in parts of Taiwan. But since the animals are essential to the ecosystem, scientists are asking authorities to help tackle this problem. Bing Wang reports.
This old railway tunnel in New Taipei has become a popular spot for ecotourism. Originally built in 1922, trains stopped running here in 1985. Now its main attraction is bats. But scientists managing the site have noticed that over the years, the number has fallen.
可是我们施工期间所的呵护下，蝙蝠都至少都50只以上。那现在的人为干扰比当时我们施工期间还严重。
Open daily for visitors, authorities here have had to set up a reservation system to slow down the impact on bats. Everyone now needs to book a spot before coming. Signs like these were also placed outside the tunnels, telling tourists to not disturb the bats.
像我们告示牌的设计上，我们有增加蝙蝠的图案，以及蝙蝠的一个生长习性，让大家知道说，其实它是一个夜行性的生物。那我们可以就是轻声细语，或是放慢你的脚步这样子。
Currently, there are 38 species of bats in Taiwan. That's down from 69 in 1983. But while the Sandiaoling Tunnel has improved measures to protect the animals, other places have suffered from bat loss as well. In Pingdong, southern Taiwan, bats in another old tunnel dwindled in number after the surrounding woods were cleared due to water conservation projects. As bats play a crucial role in maintaining the ecological balance of various ecosystems, scientists are asking everyone, the public and the authorities, to be more aware and to do what they can to preserve bat habitats. Chris Ma and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for joining us here on TaiwanPlus this evening. Finally, enjoy these fireworks in Turkey, celebrating the country's 100 years as a republic. I'm Eric Au, and we hope to see you again later.